Hello, this is a video talking about structures of the heart. This is something that you'll need to memorize for this course. And so here's a short video going through what happens during a heartbeat. So we mostly divide, when we think about the heart, we divide it into two pumps. One pump on the right side and one pump on the left side. The pump on the right side takes deoxygenated blood from your body and pumps it to your lungs, the capillaries around your alveoli in your lungs, where it can become oxygenated. That blood then returns back to the left side, this second pump here, a higher pressure pump that sends the blood that's freshly oxygenated from your lungs to your brain or to your legs or to any of your organs or tissues that need that oxygenated blood. So there are three main loops or pathways, and those pathways include the pulmonary, which is the blue pathway here, the blue that turns to red, this short pathway here, from the heart to the lungs and back again. There's the systemic pathway, which goes from the left side of your heart to any of your body systems, to your arms or your head or your legs or your organs. And there's a third one, which is littler and doesn't make it into many diagrams, called the cardiac loop or cardiac pathway. And that is feeding oxygenated blood from the aorta to the outside of the heart, because the heart muscle tissue needs blood too. That's a separate tiny loop. I won't be talking about this one today just because it never fits into the diagrams. You have to look really close to see it, but it's similar to the systemic pathway. So we have these pumps on the right side and the left side of the heart. And we're going to start with the right side of the heart. And I recommend that you walk yourself through this every day for this course, every day until the exam. So the right side's goal is to pump deoxygenated blood from wherever it's coming from to the lungs to pick up that oxygen, to do external respiration there. So on the right side, we're going to start with blood coming in through here from the head or from the arms, anything above the heart, or blood coming in from here, from anything below the heart. These two structures have names. They're called either superior, meaning above, from up, things coming up higher, or inferior. Inferior just means coming from below, doesn't mean it's worse. They're both part of the same vein. This is called the vena cava. Some people say vena cava, and it means cavernous vein, big vein. It is a really big vein. You could fit your finger inside of there. So this is carrying blood that's deoxygenated. It's come back from the body tissues. It's under low pressure, like blood in all veins, basically zero pressure. And that's coming into the heart so that it can be pumped to the lungs. The first chamber that blood goes into is this chamber right here. There are 4 chambers to the heart, 1, 2, 3, and 4. This first chamber here is called the right atrium. Atrium like entryway. The blood comes in there under low pressure. This is deoxygenated blood. This is where your blood kind of gathers on its way to the lungs. This is not a very strong, if we look at the walls here, they're not very thick. This is not a very strong chamber, but it's an essential part of the heart. When the right atrium squeezes, it does a gentle squeeze, but it only has to take blood a few centimeters, but it still squeezes. The blood goes past this structure here, this valve. This valve is called an atrioventricular valve. Atrio, because it's coming from an atrium, and ventricular, because it's going into the ventricle. So atrium and ventricle. The blood can only go through one way due to the structure or the shape of that valve. This makes sure that when your ventricle squeezes, the blood doesn't go back where it came from, but instead goes out the proper exit. Another name for the right atrioventricular valve is the tricuspid valve. Once the blood goes through that, it's anchored down by these little strings called chordae tendineae. It is in the chamber called the right ventricle. The right ventricle is this chamber right here. The right ventricle is stronger. Look at this. This is all muscle tissue here. And when it squeezes, the blood will go under higher pressure. It'll go further, faster. And the blood is going to leave through a valve. This valve right here is called a semilunar valve. Due to its shape, somebody thought it looked like a half moon. There are actually 3 little half moons in a semilunar valve. I don't know how the math adds up there, but that's what they're called. The semilunar valve is not as strong as your atrioventricular valve. It doesn't have to be. This one has to be strong to prevent a really strong influx of blood this way, that we don't want that. This one only has to prevent blood falling back kind of by gravity. Not such a hard job. These are weaker valves. There's a semilunar valve on the right side and on your left side, just like there's an atrioventricular valve on your right and left side. So once the blood is in there, it's in the pulmonary trunk. It's gone past this semilunar valve, and now it's in the pulmonary trunk. It's an artery. The pulmonary trunk is an artery. The blood there is under high pressure. Arterial blood is always under high pressure. That blood is going to go into the left or the right. So this is the right side of the heart. This is the left side of the heart. So here's our left and here's our right pulmonary arteries. These are carrying blood under high pressure, they're arteries, to the lungs. Pulmonary means going to the lungs. At the lungs, we know what happens. External respiration. The hemoglobin drops off any carbon dioxide it's carrying, the plasma drops off any carbon dioxide it's carrying, and oxygen will come in from the alveolar lumen into the capillary just by diffusion. That's external respiration, which we know from Unit 2. The blood will come back from the lungs. Just going to scroll up here for a second. So the blood has gone out to the lungs, this one or this one. It's doing its external respiration there. And now it's going to come back through this pathway into this chamber. The pathway that it's going to come back to involves 2 and 2 veins. They're called the right pulmonary veins from the right side, right lung, and the left pulmonary veins from the left side, coming from the left lung. They both go, even though it doesn't look like it in this picture, they both go to the same place. They both dump into this chamber here, which is your left atrium. It's got the same name as the right atrium, which is great. It's just on the left side of the heart. It does the same job. It's a weak pump that just has to send blood that far. So the left atrium will squeeze, the blood will go past a valve. This valve has 3 names. It's called the left atrioventricular valve, which is the one I hope you remember. But you'll also hear it called the bicuspid or the mitral valve. These 2 names both get used. They mean the same thing though. This valve, whose purpose is to make sure blood does not go the wrong way. The blood enters this last chamber of the heart here, the left ventricle. Ventricle means little belly, which is a funny name, but there you have it. And the left ventricle is the strongest of your 4 chambers of the heart. The most muscular because it has the hardest job to do. That blood has to go all the way up to your brain, all the way down to your toes, out to your arms, to every organ, every tissue, except for your lungs. This is very high pressure blood. This is what we measure when we measure blood pressure, how hard this part of your heart is squeezing. When it squeezes, the blood will go through this semilunar valve. It's sometimes called the aortic semilunar valve because it leads to this next structure, this big artery called the aorta. The aorta is a big artery, and because it's an artery, the blood is under high pressure. So blood is under high pressure in the aorta, in the pulmonary trunk, in the pulmonary arteries, but in all of the veins, like the vena cava, superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, your right pulmonary veins and your left pulmonary veins, that blood would all be under low pressure. So arteries can carry oxygenated or deoxygenated blood, but what they always do is carry high pressure blood away from the heart. Sometimes we'll call this the ascending aorta on the way up, leading to the head and your arms, your left arm, your right arm, and it wraps around behind, down towards your thorax and your abdomen, and we call that part the descending aorta. That's not in this picture, but this tube continues down behind the heart and carries blood to the rest of your body tissues. I'll make a couple more videos in a moment about arteries versus veins versus capillaries, and about how to read an EKG.